Hello, this video is to show you some images you might want to discuss for the second paper, which is about advertising images. Of course, this cute bird is only here because it's cute. This image caught my eye in a catalog from one of my favorite companies, and it just caught my eye because of the strangeness of the pose. There is a book called This Bridge Called My Back, which is an anthology of writings by feminists of color. And I just thought it was interesting that the woman of color is actually lifting up the white woman on her back. And I was thinking about how I've never really seen an image like that where a white woman is lifting up a black woman or a woman of color. So as I look through the story in the full catalog, in part because this woman looks a little bit like my daughters, I noticed a theme, which is not absolute, but I'm being really picky in particular here. There's a theme where the woman of color shows up in zesty outfits, as the copy says, but always with this backdrop that is wild. Oceans with waves and rocky cliffs and really kind of raw, primitive looking architecture. On the other hand, her friend in this particular image maybe could be an ethnic woman as well, but in the other pictures, not so much, always depicted with the backdrop of a city, or what Patricia Hill Collins would refer to in that colonial context as civilization. This is Marta in Barcelona, and so we can assume she's Spanish. Now, that was a particularly nuanced, nuanced critique that I just made, and I wouldn't expect many people to notice that. But this Lean Cuisine ad that isn't showing up correctly is also something I found a bit interesting, because the copy of the ad says what you want, how you want it. And when I think about Grease, the movie, You're the One That I Want, and the idea of desire, the substitution here of lean cuisine for desire in general does seem kind of interesting. So that's a bit of a hint. And then this woman looks rather thin, of course, and she's eating lean cuisine like it's the greatest thing she ever had. You can't see the very bottom of the print, but it says, your goals in your control, you rule. So the whole idea of the ethics of power and control in, for example, in John Stoltenberg's ethics of white male sexuality are about power and control. Here we have an ethics of white womanhood in which power and control comes through meeting your desires just with a bowl of lean cuisine. And there is so much more that I think you can say about that. So I welcome you to go ahead and have fun with that one if you'd like. Now, the second slideshow is a little bit more extreme, and I used this last year, so I decided just to use it again this year because I find this particular editorial spread from Vogue interesting. There are black women in all of these shots, which is good to see in terms of representation, but just as we saw in the catalog ad, the darker woman is not part of necessarily civilization. She's associated with things that are more wild or primitive or uncivilized. So I don't know what's happening with her hat, but the light shining on her, casting the shadow, is a bit unusual in the left side. Then on the other side, we see a woman whose hair is blowing freely and looking directly at the camera. So that gaze, that direct gaze, is something that usually connotes desire or power or control. And in this case, I guess it's up to you whether her power is the kind of power that would make you a desirable employee, for example, or whether it's the kind of power that would intimidate someone. And as this particular spread continues, the outfits become a little bit stranger. So this woman in feathers, you can see her hands and her arms, but her face is partly covered by a strange kind of face jewelry. And if we look up close, it's an almost alien or animalistic kind of attachment that they put over her nose and on her face. Her hair is in this fascinating triangle shape, which is beautiful and kind of mirrors the sculptured collarbone and her cheekbones and the angle of her face. She's incredibly beautiful, and the hairstyle is interesting with that. And yet they put this face jewelry on her. And in the image in the magazine, it's more of the shadows, more of the exaggeration, and more of the feathers, so that my children found these images disturbing and frightening. Again, the two interesting hairstyles, but with women looking more like fruit or frogs or vegetables, possibly, than human beings. And the word that perhaps Patricia Hill Collins would use here is exotic. This last page, we have the white woman sheathed with the snake-like eyes, perhaps looking snake-like, and the woman on the left with her strange lampshade hat yet again, and an interesting bit of jewelry and yellow arrow pointing toward her vulva. So interesting fashion, maybe a little hypersexual. And then the blue hair that is hanging on the bottom of this dress, hair or feather or tail, also exotic. And the woman on the left with the eyelashes, which might be made from peacock feathers. I think that this particular spread and this particular kind of fashion makes the woman look more than human, maybe less than human. And again, it's up for you to determine what you think and how you'd like to analyze any one of these pictures. So I hope you enjoyed that. You can use the handout for the assignment and certainly ask me any questions you have about how to analyze these images for the second paper.